I'm Dave Anthony, and we are on the precipice of the 2023 Turnbull Cup presented by McMunn Yates, getting ready for a rematch from the 2018 Turnbull Cup final, the Virden Oil Capitals against the Steinbach Pistons. I'm joined now with voice of the Niverville Nighthawks, Kevin Pauls. Palsy, I don't know how many would have predicted this to be the finals, but you got to give both teams a lot of credit getting to this point in two very hard-fought series. Let's start with the Virden Oil Capitals, who are coming off that impressive Game 7 win. What have you liked about them through round one versus OCN and then this latest series win against the Portage Terriers?
Well, in a lot of cases, I don't think the Virden Oil Capitals got the respect they deserved. And I know from me as an outside observer, at first, on paper, it was hard to look past, some of the bigger names that, let's say, OCN had that I thought would be big contributors. And all it's been for the Virden Oil Caps is contribution by committee. They have some scorers in the top 10 throughout the playoff scoring, but it's been just solid defensive effort. Key guys chipping in at the right times with goals. Yesterday, they answered back a couple times in a Game 7, and key saves from Owen LaRock. There's a reason why they're successful, and I think he's a big part of it. 937 save percentage and a 1.95 goals against in the playoffs. That's pretty impressive and a big reason why they're in the finals.
Yeah, and you can't look past Eric Reed either. He came in and righted the ship when that thing started to kind of speed wobble against the Terriers. He posted a very impressive shutout. So whichever goalie is in the net for Virden, and they are completely fine rotating. They've done so in both series. That team has confidence in whoever's in the crease.
Yeah, and if you have a 1-2 punch like that, and you know that you have a fail safe, and you can, rely on the guy down the bench, that gives you a great deal of confidence and a lot of weaponry. And goaltending has been key, as we've seen with the Pistons too, with Dominic Wasik. He's played very well, and he's made key saves that have given the Pistons a good chance to win, and the reason why they're in the finals.
Absolutely. And let's just go back to the oil caps here for a sec. I know that we've both been doing our homework for this series, and one of the most unique stats that I found was every Virden Oil Capital forward or defender has at least 1 point in these playoffs. Again, you talked about it, but that is depth personified when you're getting contributions from absolutely everyone.
For certain. And that was a difference against Portage. You look at Portage, all their big guns came out to play in the first series against the Niverville Nighthawks and then went a little bit quiet against the Oil Capitals, who just chugged away. There were certain games where they might have faltered, but you look at Nolan Chasko, Dean Gorchinski, and a lot of their supporting cast there, they plugged away every game and they had that help up and down the lineup. They scored shorthanded, they scored on the power play. There's a lot of contributions going around that lineup, and it's impressive to watch.
Speaking of special teams, how about the Oil Caps penalty kill against one of the best power plays that maybe we've seen in quite some time with the Terriers? They only allowed one power play goal, and it came in Game 7. A pretty impressive 18 of 19 for the Oil Capitals.
Yeah, and that's just through great structure, great coaching, and great execution. And a lot of the cases we've seen through the playoffs, as you and I have talked about with the Pistons in the series against Swan Valley, there were times where Swan was out performing the Pistons when it came to execution. And that's the Capitals personified. They execute. You give them the chance on the ice, and they're going to turn it into goals on the scoreboard.
Now, something with the Steinbach Pistons that they did throughout the series against Swan Valley and at times against the Winkler Flyers was wave after wave of pressure. They put a lot of shots on goal towards Kobe Grant, and they really made the Stampeders defenders and goaltender work hard. Steinbach, like Virden's, got that depth, but Steinbach may have a little bit more offensive punch on all four lines, and there's really no shift off that Steinbach ever provides their opponent.
Steinbach plays a heavy game. They play a well executed game as well, because Paul Dick and his coaching staff are fantastic at what they do. When it comes to controlling the offensive zone and leveraging their size against some of the other smaller groupings, that's in a war of attrition, that's where you get those kind of battles that you can outlast. And in a long 7-game series, those little hits can add up. And for a team like the Pistons to have such weaponry at their disposal, oh man, like I said, controlling the offensive zone, and you wear down your opponent. And then all of a sudden, when you have to finally get up and go to go down the length of the ice and find your own possession, that becomes somewhat difficult. Forget about special teams, penalty kill, power play. It's so hard to manage.
Absolutely. And Steinbach got some contributions from the likes of the players you'd expect. Ty Paisley has gone off and he really set the tone for the end of that Swan Valley series. But Dawson Milliken put up 5 goals in that second round series. Travis Hensrud, Ian Amsbaugh scored critical goals at critical times. And the defense chipped in as well, which you need in the playoffs. But again, Steinbach's top guys are coming to play and they're a load to handle for anybody. And the Oil Caps are going to have to be ready for that.
Certainly, we know the big names for the Pistons that are, someone to watch. But you talk about Amsbaugh and Hensrud. Hensrud's only sitting at what, 9 points, I think it is. So he hasn't even broken through the ceiling that we would expect the Travis Hensrudian things of. So there's those types of contributors for the Pistons that I don't think we've seen the best from yet. Sort of what I was expecting from the Portage Terriers, but unforeseen circumstances that we don't know. Who knows what the dealings are there. But in this case with the Pistons, there's a lot of weaponry, and I think some of them have still been quiet, and we have the best to see yet.
The penalty kill, just like the Oil Capitals, was very impressive against the Swan Valley Stampeders. Steinbach only gave up 1 power play goal as well. And when you can do that, both teams can kind of play a little bit closer to the edge, knowing their penalty kill units can step up when the time calls for it. That makes things a little bit easier to maybe swing momentum back to you or grab momentum away from your opponent with a hit or a scrum or some type of physical altercation.
Yeah, and both teams are pretty disciplined, so you're not dealing with those after the whistle type things where the retaliation penalties become an issue. So yeah, you have that confidence that if there is something like, a guy's going to step on a stick or whatever, those unavoidable ones, if you know that you can lean back on your penalty kill, and like we talked about, you have a good goalie in net, yeah, then you just go to work. You just try to kill off that 2 minutes at a time or more, depending on what happens. But in this case, you do your best and you just go to work.
In the category of fascinating stats, and I like looking at the numbers like this sometimes, Palsy. Both teams 8-5. Both teams have a .615 winning percentage. Both teams have won a couple of games in overtime. Steinbach has 40 goals for, Virden has 41. Steinbach's allowed 36, Virden's allowed 35. Penalty minutes is skewed a little bit because that Winkler series for Steinbach added to some penalty minutes. But statistically, as teams, this could not get much closer than it is right now.
No, and that's what I had down on paper here too, Dave. It's two very similar groupings, maybe a little bit different in their attack. I would consider the Virden Oil Caps to be very similar to how the Swan Valley Stampeders played. They regroup really well, they move up the ice really well, and they can fire line after line against you. So it's one of those things where you have to have your hard hats on for a 60-minute hockey game. Something of which I think the Pistons have lacked a little bit. They're a little slower to start, and that's where teams like the Oil Capitals can pounce, and that's where they've made their bread and butter this playoff so far.
Both teams can boast a pretty impressive streak of coming back in games and bending but not breaking. And Steinbach, found ways to win a couple of games in double overtime. Virden was down 2-0 in their series, and they were down, a couple of goals in some games. They managed to come back. And then they made a big statement in game 6 where everybody contributed offensively, but both teams showed a real maturity and a real growth that has not only got them to this point, but it's going to be needed when times do get tough because both teams are going to punch the other one in the face, both metaphorically and probably literally.
Well, and like the old saying goes, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the mouth. So in this case, you don't know what to expect until it happens. And I think both teams are going to come out very hard. And it's about game management. I expect the Pistons have learned from their experiences to this point in the playoffs. And I'd expect to see them come out in a controlled and very well executed manner. On the same token, I think the Virden Oil Caps will be much the same because Tyson Ramsey is a very experienced coach, as is Paul Dick. So I think they know their assignment and they're going to come out ready to go as well.
Palsy, let's talk rest versus rust and kind of what both teams are going to be going through just fatigue wise. Virden is coming off a very hard 7-game series. The travel wasn't too bad. It wasn't like Steinbach and Swan where the travel was pretty extensive, but Virden's only getting 2 days off. Sounds like we're starting up on Saturday and Sunday in Steinbach. The Pistons have been off since Monday night's game 6 win. Just take us through your thoughts of maybe Steinbach getting the rest versus Virden continuing to have the trains roll on time.
Well, I think coming off that emotional game 7 victory will be something that the Oil Capitals will want to ride. On the other hand, with the Pistons, I think they could benefit from a little bit of time because they had a hard series against the Winkler Flyers and continued on with the Swan Valley Stampeders. So I think maybe wouldn't say there'd be some rust accumulation. I think more than anything, they're going to benefit from the break because there's obviously going to be some players banged up, and a little bit of rest may be something that they need, and we'll be able to come out strong whenever this series does get underway.
Like you said, I don't think we would have predicted Virden to make it to the finals, but we're not overly surprised that they made it there either. When you look at the coaching staffs, both have done an excellent job making the adjustments they've needed to. They've designed plays that have been executed perfectly by their teams, and they've had systems in place throughout the year that has made these teams successful and gotten them to this point. The coaching battle, Paul Dick versus Tyson Ramsey, that is going to be fascinating to watch as well from a hockey purist side.
For certain, it's going to be an absolute master class. And I'm not much of an X's and O's guy. I like taking the game, and there's certain points where I've watched recently where you can really take note of that and go, okay, that was by design. And in this case, I think it's going to be the quintessential point and the culmination of a great long MJHL season. We are going to see the best that this league has to bear, both East and West. And it's just going to be ultimately impressive for us.
Now, I was part of that team last year. I was around the team. Actually, you did game 7 with me versus the Dauphin Kings as well. So we know how many guys from Steinbach were a part of last year's final where they came up just short. And the talk is that the mission is still unaccomplished. They really want to get the job done this year. They know how hard it is to get to the finals and get over the hump. How much does last year's experience play a factor for the Pistons versus the almost youthfulness of the Oil Caps, who probably, if you asked them at the start of the year, would you make the MJHL finals? I don't know how many of them would have said yes. Just take us through the veterans versus the kids.
Well, I think, and competitive athletes do have long memories, and I think there's a sting there from that final that didn't go their way against Dauphin for the Pistons. I think that's right at the forefront of their minds. They'll push it aside when it comes time to go to work, of course, but I think it's there. I think it's a matter of unfinished business, and yeah, they certainly want to get their hands on that trophy. For the Oil Capitals, I think they understand things as well. There is a number of younger players there. This hasn't been a position that group has been in recent memory anyway, but they know how to compete. And we talked about how well executed they were under their coach, Tyson Ramsey. So in this case, I think they will be very ready for battle. And I think this is going to be a clash of obviously two of the best teams in the league.
You think the fan bases have similar memories? Because this is a rematch of 2018, and Steinbach won in Virden, and they had a lot of people. They had a couple of fan buses up. I know Virden has sent fan buses to Portage. You think both fan bases are ready to kind of go head to head in this matchup, just like the teams?
I think so too. I mean, it's a great atmosphere in both. I spent more time at the TG Smith Center than I have out in Virden, but you look at a passionate hockey community in Virden is one. They've done a great job with that facility. I watched, portions of that series all throughout on Hockey TV, and I was impressed with the level of fan support they get and what a beautiful environment they have to do it. So, yeah, this is not as close as, let's say, Virden and Portage would be. It's another, hour and a half, 2 hours down the road on top of that. So, I think this is an instance where both fan bases can go back and forth. I fully expect it to be well attended, and it's going to be great for everybody because it's just a great opportunity for people to get out and see some Class A hockey.
Just to bring it back to the schedule for a sec, this will be the third straight series for Steinbach where they've played 1 and 2 back to back, 3 and 4 back to back. Do you think that's going to help them knowing that kind of grind that it takes from games 1 and 2, especially when they're less than 24 hours apart?
I think so. I think it would have to play into your readiness, your preparation, because you get to spend 2 at home and maybe gain some momentum. We talked about the crowd, for example. When you know that you're not hopping on a bus in a day and a half and heading back, it gives you that little bit of respite in between games and maybe a little more of that comfort level that you're accustomed to. So in this case, I think I like it. I like the 2 and 2. Obviously, it would be certainly necessary if we were headed up north, for example. But in this case, I like it. I think both teams get the benefit of being at home for a couple days and are able to bring their best weapons to bear.
And Tundra Oil and Gas Place, it is built different. Obviously, the fans on both sides are going to pack the arenas, but the Pistons arena, the TG Smith, is kind of 75% around. So you have the benches and nothing behind. The Tundra Oil and Gas place, it is a bowl, and you are staring down. It's like the Coliseum where the gladiators are down in the pit. Like when that building is rocking, it can be overwhelming. And the Virden Oil Capitals are going to want to use that to their advantage.
Certainly, if they pack that, it's a bigger barn. So I
Yeah.
mean, they have a little bit more to pack. The TG Smith Center, you and I sitting in the booth hear all that noise right across the ice because we're on the far wall. But if the Virden Oil Caps and they can get everybody out of out on their feet and in the seats there in their rink, I think that'll be an amazing spectacle to see and be a part of.
All right, so we talked offense, we talked defense, we talked goaltending. Give me an X factor, a player on each side that you think is going to be a difference maker, either at some key point of the series or throughout the series. We'll start with the Steinbach Pistons. Who is your X factor?
I'm waiting for Travis Hansrud to really start lighting it up. I mean, I know that's a little bit of pressure to put on his shoulders, but we've seen what he can accomplish in recent history. And right now, I feel like there's been at times where he looks extremely dangerous, and then maybe a few shifts where he's contributing in another way. I don't want to take away from his effort because I know they're always working and doing 100% of what they can to help the team. So I think that we just haven't seen the scoring touch yet. And if things keep going the way I would expect, I think there's going to be some big goals in his future.
My X factor is Davis Fry. He came out in that Winkler series and then in the start of the Swan Valley series playing very well. Things tightened up on him, and he's learning how to play more physical to earn himself some space. He was part of that team last year. He knows how hard it is to win in the MJHL, especially in the finals. But Davis Fry needs to find a way. He's a 19-year-old. He's committed to Merciers. He wants to make a statement. This is the stage to do it. And I think Davis Fry is going to be an X factor for the Pistons. Let's go to X factors for the Virden Oil Capitals. You have got a lot of guys to choose from because, like we talked earlier, every guy has contributed some way in this playoff run. But who is a guy that you believe is going to have a key impact at some point or throughout this MJHL Turnbull Cup Finals?
Well, it'd be easy for me to say Nolan Chasko, the number one goal scorer in the playoffs. I think he's got 9 to his credit at this point and huge contributor in last night's win against Portage. I think Rue Bazin is going to be my cog in the wheel here. He's a guy that knows the ice very well. He's always on the right side of the puck. He makes good plays defensively as well as being extremely dangerous on the offensive side. I've had the pleasure of watching Rue play since he was a Pembina Valley Hawk playing out of Morden. So it's cool to see these kids that I have some familiarity with, and he's a great skater. He's physical. He can contribute on multiple levels, and he's contributed so far with 5 goals and 5 assists. So that's a pretty balanced attack offensively.
Absolutely. And again, you could look at a guy like Dean Gorchinski, who's got a surprising 12 assists in 13 games. And you know that he's just a stride or two away from finding the back of the net and really exploding. But my X factor is actually on the Virden Oil Capitals blue line in Ty Plaisir. He has played very well throughout these playoffs. Got 6 points in 13 games, but he's played a complete game. He's one of the more physical defensemen for the Oil Capitals as well. He'll make you pay in the corners, and then he can finish, whether it's off the rush or from the blue line, just putting shots through. He's a big body. He's commanded a lot of respect from the Oil Capitals dressing room, and I think he is going to be a major X factor for the Oil Capitals, both defensively and offensively. So it should be a real treat to see. Kevin Pauls, as always, we got to wrap up with predictions. Now, we got to say, we both had Steinbach over Swan Valley. I think we both had Portage over Virden. So we went 50%. That's not bad. Heading into this Turnbull Cup final presented by McMunn Yates, who do you like, why, and in how many games?
Well, the one thing I've constantly done in our pundit pick'ems throughout the course of this playoffs is I've kind of hedged towards the team that on paper looks better because it's easy, right? I don't get out to a lot of the Western Conference games. I've seen them play at times, but it's easy to get lost and not able to see the forest through the trees. After watching the way the Virden Oil Caps play, I'm extremely impressed with how they operate. Not to take away from what the Steinbach Pistons do. They're an extremely powerful club. I've said so on the air with you multiple times, and they're extremely entertaining to watch as well. I think this is going to be a well-contested series on both ends. If the Pistons play to their potential, I see them as probably being the favorite, but I'm going to go in a different direction this time around, and I'm going to pick the Virden Oil Caps in 7.
I too think it's going to be a pretty lengthy series, and both teams are going to have some highs and both teams are going to have some lows. And it's going to be up to both of the staffs and the leadership groups of both those clubs to manage that, because you can never get too high, you can never get too low. You got to try and stay at level zero. Not an easy thing to do in the MJHL finals. So, like you, I think it's going to go 7 games, but I've got Steinbach coming out at the TG Smith Center. I think that the core group from last year knows a little bit more about what it takes to win this time of year, and there's that chip on their shoulder. They do not want to see the opposition hoisting that Turnbull Cup for a second year. They're going to do absolutely everything they can, and it's going to be an epic series. And again, I think in years to come, we're going to go back and point at this series and go, that was something that the fan bases of both sides can be really, really proud of, regardless of the outcome.
I fully agree with that. And I think, like we always say, when you get a fantastic series in front of you, the people at home win, the fans of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League win, everybody wins.
And Kevin, we are going to have a front row seat. Game 1 Saturday night in Steinbach, Game 2 Sunday in Steinbach, and then the series will switch to Tundra Oil and Gas Place for Games 3 and 4 Wednesday and Thursday. Find the full schedule at mjhlhockey.ca. Kevin Pauls, thanks for doing this. It should be a whale of a series, and looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too, Dave. Thank you very much.